So that's why it doesn't matter if he comes in shape or out of shape. If he comes out of shape, at least has less hassle from me, you know. And if he's in shape, fine. I hope he is.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris, and I am a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, and host, and voiceover artist here in California. And California. Dare I say, Steve, the two of us, fans of lifting weights. So this is going to be an interesting conversation as we tackle this movie today on this particular episode.
I couldn't agree more, and I don't think either of us, maybe we would have never really picked up weights if it weren't for this film, and I think that's true for a lot of the world. I think, as you know, we talk about the influence that movies have on us today. I think this movie has more influence than it is great, if that makes any sense. I think it is a world-changing movie, not because of its filmmaking, but because of what it is.
You know, it's fascinating, Steve, when you look at this film, because it influenced things in the 80s, and the 80s influenced a lot of our culture over the last few decades. And I know every new generation or every new decade wants to lay claim to something they spawned or created, and certainly there have been. But there's a lot from the 80s, man. If you kind of and it traces back, and I know this film came out in 78, so it's like so close to the 80s that the influence of the film was really felt in the 80s. And that influence from the 80s influenced the fitness craze, the bodybuilding phase, the athletic phase, and then so much on the computer side, tech side, from the late 70s into the 80s, how that influenced. So there's so much. Music from the 80s has still influenced music we hear nowadays. So I think this is going to be a fun conversation and an interesting conversation for you and I, who always see too much into things. It's going to be fun analyzing the effect of this documentary and what it had on us as we were watching it as well.
And I think, as I've very prone to do, I've buried the lead yet again, because I don't think we've actually said that the movie that we are doing is Pumping Iron. Obviously, it's starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and this is what, really put him on the map.
Yeah.
But before we get into this, I want to do another thing that I frequently fail to remember to do, which is to plug our Patreon and Apple Podcast subscriptions. These are places where for just $5 a month, you can get ad-free versions of the show, access to our Cine-Files shorts. We have more tiers on Patreon that include our advisory board, our Cine-Files watch-alongs. You can ask questions that will appear in our show, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff available at patreon.com/thecine-files. And if you're an Apple person, just Apple Podcasts. It's one button to subscribe. It's super, super easy.
Absolutely. And for those of you who listen to our show religiously, we've been acquiring sponsors more and more over the last 2 years, really. And we got to give a big shout out to Red Circle, who's been fantastic working with us and platforming us into certain places where we've acquired more sponsors. And the way you all can help us is to really look at those products that we're advertising, or the sponsors that you hear during the breaks. And if these products work for you, these products appeal to you, to give them a chance and use our code, because that's going to keep them coming back to keep sponsoring the show, keeping the show on air, and attracting new sponsors to be part of things that we do here on the Cine-Files. So just listen. If it works for you and you like it, use the code. Make sure we sent you, and we promise you, we're never going to support any product that Steve and I don't both stand behind. So just letting you guys know, that's how we negotiate which sponsors come on the show. So if you support those sponsors, you are supporting them with our approval as well. I just wanted to throw that out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So why don't we get into
our
first question, which is, John, how did you first come to Pumping Iron?
Oh, I saw this a little bit later in life, and I'd heard about it before. When Schwarzenegger was becoming big, I'd heard about it, and I didn't rent it till later in life in the video store, then watched it and was just blown away by it. And that was right at the height where I was into bodybuilding. Like, I had a subscription to Muscle and Fitness. People forget, maybe, or those of you may not be old enough to remember, the 80s and 90s, there were so many bodybuilding magazines spurred out of what happened here in this movie. So I remember this movie being referenced multiple times. So I finally watched it one afternoon in my 20s, and I thoroughly was blown away by it. And I was so surprised to see the effect of Arnold in a younger way, like this confidence, this messing with people. I mean, this is right around the time when Michael Jordan is becoming a famous athlete, and his head games. So watching someone do it in bodybuilding, Steve, it never even occurred to me that someone would do mind games in a bodybuilding setting, and to watch Arnold do it so effortlessly and so calmly. And we're catching him right as he's retiring. So clearly this is the top of the pyramid for him at his time, top of his skills. It was a fascinating watch.
I came to it maybe a little bit earlier than that, and I can remember what I remember the most was seeing the trailer for this movie. And I think it must have been because we had a subscription to Showtime in like the late 70s, early 80s. And it must have been at that time that it came up there. And I think because I was a comic book guy who loved Superman and like all of those things, and of course the images of these muscle-bound people in comics, but they weren't really real. And so when I remember seeing this first trailer, and it was like, oh my God, here are people that actually look like the superheroes, that I'm reading in all these comic books. Yeah. And I can totally remember watching the movie for the first time. And then it had to, in my brain, I watched it at home, and in my brain, it was within the next couple of weeks that I was at a garage sale begging my parents to buy me an old set of weights from some guy at the garage sale. And then I started stupidly lifting weights however I figured out to do it at the time, knowing absolutely nothing. I never bought the muscle magazines and stuff like that at that age. Yeah. I was just sitting there trying to lift because that was just so inspired by this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's when Joe Weider was a name that I knew as well. So seeing him in a younger version or younger iteration in this documentary was a bit of a shock, because I had obviously seen him later in life in those those bodybuilding magazines, in the back pages or occasional column that he would write. So this was another part of it that I thought was fascinating. But yeah, same thing. Steve and you and I reacted. I reacted to Arnold seeing him in the movies. That's what got me to lift the weights. Not pumping iron, but later watching him pumping iron is the one that kind of woke me up to the real entire picture of this guy and how he was able to succeed at this particular venue and lay the groundwork for how he was going to succeed as an actor and then later as a governor. And as we've talked about, if you watch that series, it's real, that Arnold series on Netflix, it is real evident that this has been a pattern, and he's used these tactics his entire life.
Yep, absolutely. So a little bit of pre-production. I mean, the first thing to keep in mind is that bodybuilding was the farthest thing from mainstream in the 70s. I mean, it was a thing that like, weirdos and freaks would do, like this strange, it's like you go to the circus, like to see the freak who was the super strong man. And yes, they might've been admired. And yes, we talked about, obviously comic books is, and there were bodybuilders who had become famous like Steve Reeves and other people like that. Yeah. We had seen it, but it still was very much a niche. And these two gentlemen, George Butler is a photographer and Charles Gaines, became fascinated by this world. And in particular, I think fascinated by Arnold, who was the king of this world for many years. And they first did a book called Pumping Iron. And as they're filming, taking photographs for the book, they start thinking about making this movie.
Yeah.
And they basically went out to every rich person they could find. They had a little footage with Arnold, and they eventually raised $400,000 to make the film. The only problem with it is that the main character, Arnold Schwarzenegger, had decided to retire. So he didn't want to be in the feast. Like, I'm done. I'm not trying for Mr. Olympia again. I've won 5 times. That's it. I'm out. And they finally convinced him to do it by paying him $50,000 to compete one more time in Mr. Olympia. So that is how this comes about. Then, like a lot of documentaries, and the docu part of this, which is they consider it more of a docudrama than a documentary. It is there's a lot of things in here that are not necessarily the truth. But like a lot of documentaries, they were scrambling around trying to find, well, what's the story going to be? And initially, their story was that they brought in the actor Bud Cort, who you might know from Harold and Maude and MASH, not a big guy in any way. And the movie big hunk of the movie was going to be Arnold training him to be a bodybuilder.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so weird. And there is there was a companion documentary to this about the making of that came out, I think in 2002 or a little bit before then, called Raw Iron. And you can see some of the footage of Bud Cort being trained by Arnold. And it is as weird as you would think it would be as Steve is describing it.
And Bud Cort and the filmmakers too, it sounds like, figured out pretty quickly this didn't make sense. It wasn't going to work. And what's very cool is that Bud Cort, who was being paid to do this, he said, you know what, I'm not going to take any pay, donate my salary for the week or two I came in to work with Arnold and put it back into the movie to make the movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really kind of him.
Very kind of him.
Yeah.
They shot the 100 days leading up to the Mr. Olympia competition. They shot a little bit after, well over 100 hours of film shot for this, which, you know, you think about like the ratio of film to how long the movie is. This is an hour and 20-minute movie with 100 hours of footage. That's not that unusual in this kind of a documentary.
Okay.
You know, because you never know what you're going to get. You know, you're shooting stuff, trying to find a story. And they just did all sorts of stuff. They took them. They said, let's take Arnold to an amusement park. Let's take him to his acupuncture. Let's watch him get a haircut. They're trying to find what's going to be interesting. And, you know, and it's also partying with the bodybuilders and stuff like that, because it sounds like at this era during the 70s, that group of guys was having a lot of festivities.
Shall we say? Yeah.
Yes. I'll tell you one more thing before we jump into the film, which really occurred to me watching it this time. You know what movie I think this owes a lot to? Is Endless Summer. I think the film, because if you watch Endless Summer, it's, you know, obviously it's surfing film, and it's really what kind of created the culture of surfing in a way and made it this aspirational thing. And it also has this sense of humor, and it's also like kind of manufacturing a story to follow of these guys going around the world and surfing. And I just think there's something about this movie that I feel like there's a kinship here, you know?
Yeah, I can see that connection 100%. But you know, I got to ask you this. I mean, because before we jump in, you're a documentarian yourself. You've shot a few documentaries, and does this bother you? You know, that the premise was, we're going to pay this person who's won 5 in a row $50,000. We're going to follow him around. We're going to follow all these other people around. And in essence, you're carving the narrative of the documentary. You're not letting the documentary play out naturally. You know, and I know I'm sure there's some reshoots and retakes with documentaries about certain situations or whatever. But like with something like this is, as you said earlier, the docu part of it all is a bit weird when the director and the producer are invested in their person that they paid starring in the movie and having these interactions that make him look like a star. So it's almost like they're, how can I say this, massaging the documentary to fit into what they want it to be rather than letting it play out and finding it in post. What are your thoughts on this?
It's interesting. We just had a Cine-Files short, which I think we released in our shorts compilation, which was talking about these exact issues, because we talked about Jordan being involved in The Last Dance, and documentaries where the main people are producers on, you know, they're both subjects of the documentary and producers. And I think this gets really complicated. And you know what it reminds me of is way, way back years ago when we talked about broadcast news with Kim Masters, and there's the moment in the movie where they're with the Contras or whatever, and a guy is going to tie his shoe, and they put the camera on it, and then they have this sort of, well, we can't tell. He either has to, it has to be entirely up to him whether he ties the shoe or doesn't tie the shoe, because that's journalistic ethics, you know?
And seeing the hesitation, and Holly being like, no, you decide what you want to do. And the poor guy's just like, okay. And then eventually ties his shoe. Yeah.
So the question of like whether or not a documentary is journalism and therefore the truth, that's what we're sort of into. And I would say the first most important thing I would say is, as a viewer, you should be distrustful of all this shit. I mean, this is absolutely, because it's just.
Wait, are you saying you should be distrustful of all documentaries across the board?
Yes, I am saying that. I am saying
statement. Okay.
Well, because, and this is the thing. So, and I believe, you know, reality shows are versions of documentaries, you know, and what we see in Pumping Iron, which is the manufacturing of a conflict, which really wasn't entirely there. And they do it multiple times to create these things. That's what happens in reality shows all the time.
Right.
And so the question, so for me, when I did the Great White Shark doc, I won't say I faked things. Well, kind of. I mean, this is what would happen. Is like, so for instance, is that I have a guy describing a shark that turned towards him. Okay. And I have a shot, as you're hearing that, you see a shark turn towards camera.
Right.
That wasn't the shark. That wasn't the moment that he was in the water.
Right.
Because there was no camera on him, on the shark, at the moment that that shark turned to him that he's describing. Right. What I did was I found another shot that was very similar, that was in the same kind of location, that had a shark turn towards camera, and I used that. Right. Now, did I just lie to you there? You know, and this is this is where you really have to be distrustful of documentaries, of like nature documentaries. You do this all the time, which is like, in my case, like the shark breaches out of the water.
Yeah.
And everyone's on the boat and they go, holy shit, did you see that? But the camera got the shot of the shark.
Right.
And so in the nature doc, you know, sometimes you'll turn around and say, hey guys, you just went holy shit a second ago. Can you just do that again? And I'll get it on camera. Which is exactly what Kim Masters, when we did that broadcast news, said that would be unethical. I didn't personally think that was unethical. I think they just did this thing. I just only had one camera. This is the thing that frequently happens in interviews, and then I'll shut up and we can move on because it's a big topic, but is that frequently when you watch an interview, they only have one camera. So when you're going from the person being interviewed to the interviewee or the interviewer, that means that that shot might have come from some other time.
Yeah.
Because they only had one camera. And so like, this is what happens in documentaries all the time, is that you're manipulating things. And just that the 100 hours that they shot on this documentary means that we are not seeing 98 hours and 40 minutes worth of footage that they shot.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that was. And we don't know how it might have changed the story. And in particular, and you'll see it totally in this movie, things like reaction shots.
Yeah.
Well, the reaction shot could have come from 5 minutes earlier, 5 minutes later. We don't know that that reaction is them reacting to that. That might just be them creating drama, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Shall we get into Pumping Iron?
Let's do it.
We start, as you would expect, in a bodybuilding movie at a ballet class.
You want to slide forward and reach with your arm. And slide back, step back.
Arnold, dude, behind me.
Back with your arm.
This one is one I was always 100% convinced that this was just this brilliant thing that Arnold figured out to do to help with his posing. And then watching it this time, I was like, did they just make this up? You know?
I don't know, but I will say this: when I was in Florida State, you know, coming out of the military, becoming an actor, one of the pieces of advice that a BFA acting teacher told me, George Judy, was go and take ballet. So with my electives for a year, I took ballet for 2 semesters at Florida State so that I could loosen up my body, because he said you were too rigid with your military training and you were turning and you were too rigid in how you were moving about the stage. So I did ballet, which I was, you know, absolutely horrible as a big beefy dude would be at time. And but I learned a lot about movement. I learned a lot about stretching. I learned a lot about loosening my body up for certain things. And so it did help. So when you see this beginning, I hope it wasn't staged, because you actually see that she's right about lines. And certainly ballerinas are very aware about the lines of their body and how they're presenting certain dances or certain poses during the dance. So yeah.
Well, and I think so there's several things that I think are going on in this scene that are interesting. And one is what you just said, which is that it does seem clear that what the ballet teacher is showing them is affecting how they're doing their poses. And this is Arnold and Franco Columbo, who is, you know, was his best friend forever. And you can see, and one of the other things I think is interesting is that in the end, there's a feeling that it does kind of come down in the competition to posing.
Yes.
And so the fact that we start here and are paying attention to that really works, I think.
And then end there as well when it's the final battle between the two of them. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
But I also think, you know, you've started this movie and there are these huge muscle-bound guys in a ballet class. And I think when you start this movie, it gives you sort of like, what the fuck is this? Like, what's happening here, you know?
Yeah.
And you do get these just ridiculous poses of these huge guys. And I really think, like, the mainstream world had really never seen this kind of bodybuilding before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the final pose leading into the song, you know, Pump It Up as we go into our titles is kind of awesome.
The lyrics of this song are great. Just kind of like this whole thing. I mean, they're essentially laying the groundwork for what you're going to be seeing in the movie. and said, I got to succeed. I pump myself up. I got to get ready. This kind of stuff. So I thought it was a very, very funny song for what you get.
Totally.
Everybody wants to be a hero. Every man wants to be bigger than dad.
And we see, and I love all the old vintage footage of bodybuilders and, strongmen and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We see a crowd. It's not you could see sort of the scale of professional bodybuilding at the time by it's a really enthusiastic crowd, but it's only a few hundred people,
Yeah.
And there we see Lou Ferrigno for the first time, who, man, he's huge.
6'5", 275 pounds. That is massive. And this is Lou Ferrigno before the Hulk, for those of you who remember the Incredible Hulk. And this is Lou Ferrigno, who is like just coming into his own, a young competitor here coming into his own, and becomes like the foil for Arnold throughout this whole movie.
We see Franco Columbo, and then we finally see Arnold. And they did such a good job, and Arnold does such a good job of having an attitude, a confidence, an ego through this whole thing that is just so far above anybody else that he's around.
No, you're right. It's so, and again, this is where I have to ask these questions as we watch this or as we talk about this movie. Is like, were they told to kind of tamp down their personalities? Were they told to maybe let Arnold have the last word or let Arnold do this or that? Was it edited in a certain way that only exchanges where Arnold got the better or looked like the more confident person? Is that the takes that they used? So it's just an interesting thing to watch when you're watching the movie now as an older person, how much of this is constructed and how much of this is authentic in the interactions that you're seeing.
I think it is 100% both. I really do, because I think there's an essence of Arnold that they capture.
Yes, 100%.
Well, and I think the reality show metaphor is a good one, which is that you're filming things and you see something about Arnold's personality that pops.
Yeah.
And the Bud Court thing has failed, so we don't really have that thread. And they really did manufacture a lot of the Lou Ferrigno kind of competition.
Yeah.
And I think they went to, I think it was very clear. They went to Arnold. It's not exactly, and I'm curious as we go on to this, because I'm curious about your opinion about this, is that it's not exactly that he's the heel.
No.
He's like this, he's like this unique, it's like a villainous hero, or you know what I mean? Where it's like, he is messing with people in a way that you shouldn't like him.
There are certain people in life that can pull off what he pulls off. And it is supremely frustrating for the other people in the room or in the area who can't pull off what he pulls off, but can see through it because everyone else is lauding him or kissing his ass for his behavior or his actions or his commentary or whatever, because he has this charm, this innate, inherent charm. And he stands out above everybody else. Look, Franco says he's got the best body. Lou says he's the strongest guy. Everyone's got their reasons for thinking they can beat Arnold, right? But when you're watching the film, you're awestruck when you watch his body. It is just, you can't help but think, this is a perfect body. This is the most perfect body I've ever seen. And so to add to that, the charming ball busting, well, charming, I guess I would say if you're not on the other end of it, but like just the way that he is smiling and deftly sliding the knife into you every time. Jordan was the same way. Jordan befriended people all the time and then just stuck the knife in there to put their guard down. And so certain people just have this ability to do that. And when you see it out there, when you see it through someone as incredible like Arnold, you're just like, this is amazing. No one else can get away with this.
Yeah, I really think, and I know for a fact, and we'll get to some of them, that some of these things that he says are just manufactured for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think again, I'm just going to say the reality show thing where you go like, okay, this person's going to be the standout character in this season of Survivor or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that they find a thing and then they exploit that thing. I think there are things that are true about Arnold in terms of his ego, in terms of his confidence, in terms of the way he was the ruler of Gold's Gym at that time.
Right.
That's true. And then they amplified them, and he was consciously amplifying them to make this movie work.
Totally. Yeah.
But the moment at the end of this competition where he's just smiling and he bows and, waves and gets the standing ovation, you're like, yes, this guy is the king. And speaking of Gold's Gym, that's where we end up, and we hear some narration explaining that this is the mecca of bodybuilding at the time in Venice, California. And what's so crazy is just how small that gym was.
Yeah.
I
remember when I first moved here, I made a pilgrimage to a gym. And it's like the outside area is so small. And the inside areas you watch here in the film is so small. And you're just like, this is the mecca. This is where everybody ran to. This is the place. And they hadn't even expanded it that much when I first came in 2000 and immediately drove. I think my first weekend I drove to go find it. But yeah, I was surprised, man. It's like coming to Hollywood and you walk the Hollywood walk or the walk on Hollywood Way with all the stars, and it's like dirty and grimy and trashy and all that kind of stuff. You're just like, oh, wow, this isn't what I thought.
It is the land of illusions. Like people come to Hollywood expecting to find movie magic, and it's like they don't make movies in Hollywood. Most of the movies are made in the Valley, or they're made down in Century City and in Culver. It's like Hollywood is just a street,
Where's the magic fairy dust? I know there's something here. It's got to be here somewhere.
Well, the other thing that occurs to me is this is, Beach Town, California, mid 70s is the movie Dogtown and Z-Boys, which it's another essentially a sport of skateboarding that's invented in the era, right in the same location at exactly the same time as this is going on at Gold's Gym, And we see on a sign that it's 101 days until Mr. Universe, which is November 7th, and Mr. Olympia, which is November 8th. And Franco Columbo, I love Franco Columbo in this movie.
He's so good, man.
Yeah. He's, it's muscle failure, and Arnold is working out, and but I look at the iron they're throwing around and lifting. It's just like, holy shit, these guys are strong.
It's absolutely jaw-dropping, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I literally wrote, as Arnold is looking himself in the mirror, my note was, Jesus, he's huge.
Yeah.
That was my note.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, 28 years old, 6'2", 240 pounds. Mr. Olympia for the past 5 years. He is preparing to defend his title this year for the last time.
Which ends up not being true.
It's fascinating too when you think about having read those magazines, and what was it? Flex was another one that was around that time for Muscle and Fitness, and there was like Muscle Something Illustrated, and so there were so many. And then I tell you this: when I worked at a bookstore, I would, you'd get huge discounts on magazines. So I would absolutely stock up whenever the new ones came, and I would just kind of read through this. I was fascinated by these characters and the personalities of these people and the dedication, the drive, and the drama. And I always wanted to do it, but I never could. Like just the amount of dedication, which Arnold talks about later in the film, is just astounding. But this thing that when you're looking at all that's happening here, it really is just kind of jaw-dropping to see how they worked all of this around Arnold,
Well, and the next moment is so smart because you work on the assumption that most people watching this movie don't understand how bodybuilding works or how the competition works. And so you have Arnold explaining, and I love this explanation about, since it's not just about pure muscle mass, it's about symmetry and beauty.
Good bodybuilders have the same mind when it comes to sculpting than a sculptor has. You have to analyze it. You look in the mirror and just say, okay, I need a little bit more deltoids, a little bit more shoulders so to get the proportions right.
I think that framing of we are athletes and we are artists sculpting our bodies is a perfect framing for the movie.
Yeah, Steve, because he also says like a sculptor just slaps on extra clay and adds those muscles, but we do it in a harder way because we work on our muscles, we work on our areas that are weak, and we build them up with a lot of training and weightlifting and what have you. So he's essentially saying it's, we are our work is a little bit more elevated than you think. And we absolutely should be talked about in the same breath as a sculptor, which I thought was an incredible amount of chutzpah from Mr. Schwarzenegger.
Well, it is funny that there are these parts of sports in which aesthetics count, know, and so it's like diving, ice skating, gymnastics. These are all things where aesthetics, a certain kind of beauty matters. Yeah. And so like where you draw the line of like, okay, this is just the beauty of the human body. is a very interesting. I think Arnold makes a really interesting point.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people sometimes discount about Arnold's success is it wasn't just that he had a great personality or that he looked good with his shirt off and all of that. It was that the man studied. He studied the human body. He studied what was working for him, what wasn't working for him. He did the research. He did trial and error, saw what worked for his body, saw how to work on his weak points. Like, this is a man who basically studied the human body for years in order to be able to be ready to be a champion. And along with that, he had a natural, bubbly, charming, attractive personality. And that's the person who shines, bro. Especially when in these small, up and coming type of sports or recreational activities, whatever you want to call it. You're always looking for that one person who is completely dedicated to the sport and has a personality that will drag the sport into the mainstream. We're having this battle right now, and I certainly don't want to get into it too deeply, and I don't want to offend anybody, but we're having this battle right now because of how Caitlin Clark has come in like a dynamo out of what she did the last 2 years in the NCAA and went into the WNBA, a league that has been going on for 20-something years with great stars who have been a part of the league since its inception. Great, legendary female basketball players. But timing-wise, and the explosion of attention on female sports, she just has hit at the right time and has come in and brought all this attention. They've broken so many records this year with her as a rookie on a team that's not a winning team right now. They've broken so many records all over the country every time she plays a game in those venues. They're going to bigger venues in those cities that they've never done before in order to accommodate the demand. Caitlin has great personality, a great approach to the game, and for whatever reason, instinctual, subconscious, whatever, people gravitate to her game in large numbers. Now, there's also other women who are coming into the game like Angel Reese and Cameron Brink and Cardozo, who all have fantastic talent and can play the game like nobody's business and certainly bring eyes. But for whatever reason, Caitlin brings more eyes than everybody else, and it's caused some backlash along with some praise. And so I would imagine there was the same thing that happened with Schwarzenegger. People wanted to criticize him for being selfish or being about himself and ignoring maybe the other bodybuilders or making sure the other bodybuilders are behind him. But that's the price you pay when someone comes along to drag your sport into the mainstream, because everybody is going to eat now in ways that they didn't eat before. But the professional jealousy is always, or frustration is always going to be there. And so it's fascinating to watch the movie again all these years later and see how he navigates this and how effortlessly it seems that he accepts being the king of this jungle, so to speak.
It's so funny because I think you can, all of Arnold is there. You know what I mean?
100%.
You can see, like, this is, it's funny. I read his book called Total Recall, I think, a few years ago. And I just remember just being, it's just what you said. I was so impressed by the discipline. Obviously there's discipline, but the trial and error and figuring everything out and, failing. Like, I think there's some big competition he doesn't win. He doesn't win his first Mr. Universe or Mr. Olympia. I don't remember which one it was. Yeah. And that failure, like Jordan, not making the team, motivates him. And that sort of drive to success that would see him become a movie star and become governor, you could see it all right here, in this film.
100%.
And then we get to what's among the most famous things coming out of this movie after he's done talking about being a sculptor is he says,
the greatest feeling you can get in a gym, or the most satisfying feeling you can get in a gym, is the pump.
And he goes into what pumping up your muscles is, and blood is rushing in there and it's filling up with air. And then he says,
it's as satisfying to me as coming is, as having sex with a woman and coming. So can you believe how much I am in heaven?
This statement that getting pumped is like coming sent so many young boys to lift weights. And all, I don't know if you believed him, but I kept trying to find that. And
I think one leads to the other. And the pheromones, I think, is what he's essentially alluding to. that overall joy that gets unlocked when you hit that apex of working out, which happens every once in a while, can match any release of pheromones or what have you when you're having sex. And so he is trying to say this in his slight broken English, that it's comparable. And so he's essentially saying, I'm releasing endorphins both in the day and nighttime with everything that I'm doing. I'm living my best life right now is basically what he was trying to get across. But I also thought it was really smart of the filmmakers to drop this early in the film. So immediately, if you're watching the movie, you're like, what? And so now you're in, right? That's that moment. Either you're in or you're out when he's comparing it to sex. And I'm sure a majority of people were intrigued by this comparison. And then maybe as they thought about it, went, you know what? He's not wrong.
I'm like getting the feeling of coming in the gym. I'm getting the feeling of coming at home. I'm getting the feeling of coming backstage when I pump up, when I pose out in front of 5,000 people. I get the same feeling. So I'm coming day and night. I mean, it's terrific, right?
Arnold has later said that this is just bullshit, and that he just knew the movie needed a thing for people to focus on. And he's like, no, when you lift weights to exhaustion, it's painful and horrible. You know, it's all pain. But we were all like, look, I mean, and of course you're right. You do get endorphins from a workout, and you will feel better after. But this idea of like, oh, it's just like an orgasm. No.
I know. I love it.
We see a woman pulling Arnold's shirt off, and it ends up that we're at a prison. We're at Terminal Island, California, and he's posing there. And there's just one moment where he ends up kissing the girl that pulled his shirt off, and he says,
"Hey, this girl maybe didn't have a kiss for years, so might as well give her a break."
This is another moment that I think is very much this is Arnold at this time, and this is. More severe behavior like that is things that he later had to apologize for.
Great point, Steve. You're right. Yeah. And a little bit. And I mean, he has a playful moment with another prisoner who is clearly implying that because he wanted a kiss too, but he wanted it from the girl, not from Arnold. Right. And Arnold took that moment, of course, because it's the late 1970s to make a playfully veiled jab at him possibly being gay in prison, so to speak. So yeah, interesting stuff.
But the other thing that happens is some of the prisoners are looking at this guy and have never seen anything like it. And I love the moment like,
first time I ever seen somebody's arms 23 inches.
Big dude, all the way big dude.
And then we see magazine covers with Franco, Arnold, and Lou Ferrigno. And we see how people are being inspired by this. Like there's this small guy who's come to the gym to work out, and he says,
my father's real tall and I'm short, so I want to be, at least if I can't get as tall as he is, I want to be as wide as he was.
I think there's such a, this is the end of the 70s. Yeah. And there's between this and Rocky, I think there's like a reclaiming of masculinity, and in particular masculinity in the gym.
Yeah, right. Because there were a lot of, skinnier kind of nerdy leads that were going on there in the 70s, Dustin Hoffman and others. And here is a bit of a pushback on it that leads us, of course, into the massive 80s me generation and action films that come as a result of this as well.
And then we have a little bit of Arnold giving this smaller guy advice, which I wonder if it's like connected a little bit to the Bud Cort stuff that didn't work. But he's giving advice of like that smaller guys tend to hide a little bit and bigger guys don't do that, and you can't do that. And he shows it and demonstrates it, and you go, okay, I see this. And I think this idea of never hide, always walk out like you've already won, that's Arnold.
Yeah, absolutely Arnold. Yeah, act as if, right?
Yep.
Visualize it. And act as if you've been there and act as if it will happen. And that's a great point. And you know what? Arnold now has this great free newsletter that he does every week. And he gives great advice in those newsletters, both for the mental and physical aspect of your life. And so this tendency to help people has always been inherent in Arnold. And yes, this film, you see that it's, he can be a bit, they played up his ability to mess with people mentally, but that moment where he's helping the kid, I mean, he's legitimately helping him. And he's legitimately saying, you need to stop hiding these pieces of yourself, work on them so that you can be proud of them. So in essence, saying, take your negatives and turn them into a positive, And so you see that that's an instinctual thing in him from the beginning.
Right. We're at another competition, and there we meet this big blonde guy, and this is Mike Katz.
Mike Katz, 31 years old, 6'1", 240 pounds. One of the top amateur bodybuilders in the world.
And we go to his house in Connecticut, and we see cute stuff with his kids, and that he's a high school teacher. And the kid hanging on his muscles and all that stuff. And it's really cute. And then we're with him training in his garage and practicing and posing. And what we hear is basically his story of how he got here.
Yeah.
Which is, he was picked on as a kid. He had glasses. He was Jewish in a mostly Catholic neighborhood.
I can remember times when kids would be going to dances and I would leave a dance, like 11 o'clock at night. I'd just leave a dance for no reason and say, I'll show them, and go and run on a track, for 2 or 3 hours, and just go home and lift weights.
I did that.
I was just going to say, you had a reaction to that.
Yeah. As I said, I was bullied a lot, pretty badly, for a majority of years in my formative years until I was 15. I've spoken about it, lifting weights, changing my life and fighting back against the person who bullied me. But, there were a lot of tough days, a lot of tough nights, tough weeks, tough days. And so when I started the lifting process, and I couldn't get a date with a girl to save my life. So, going to those dances, that's when, like, now looking back, Steve, I can be very well aware that I had strong social anxiety disorder, very strong shyness, very strong feelings of inadequacy around girls that I was attracted to or thought were beautiful. And yeah, when people, you add that people are making fun of you, or people who have become your friends all of a sudden turn on you in the middle of gym class and say they'll punch you in the face just to prove to these guys how tough they are. Those betrayals, they stay with you. That pain stays with you. And so once I made that turn where I decided instinctually enough was enough, then every slight I got, I used as more fuel to put that towel underneath the armoire and do my 100 sit-ups on the hardwood floor, or take the 10 speed and ride for 2 hours, or lift those Russell red, white, and blue concrete weights wrapped in plastic outside or in my bedroom. So those are those things, because you never want to feel that way again. Once you realize that you can unlock something and your body reacts to it and your mind reacts to this feeling of strength, every time someone does that to you, you want to run back to that place, because that place is a sanctuary that makes you feel better about yourself. And in a way, you're fighting back, So that hit me hard when Mike was saying that in the movie this time around.
It's funny. I had similar things, but what I didn't have at that age, I had no discipline. I had no physical discipline at all. So like, I had the intention, I'm going to go home and lift weights. And then I'd lift a few and go, that's enough. It really wasn't until late college, when I started really doing martial arts, that discipline became something that I had, but I certainly didn't have it when I was in high school or junior high at all.
That is so surprising to me, because all I've ever known you to be is a disciplined person and an organized
I wasn't
person.
At all.
So it's shocking to me to hear that there was a time in your life when you weren't disciplined and weren't, kind of on top of things. So very surprising.
No, it's kind of you to say, but true. No, I definitely was not.
We're definitely going to get you drunk and do a Cine-Files After Dark, and I want to hear these stories. I want to hear these young stories before you became disciplined.
You want to hear the story about how I had attended a class so little at Cal that the professor died and I didn't know it? You want to hear stories like that?
Oh my God. Yeah, man, because I think people can relate to that stuff. People,
I was
go through our journeys.
No, I'll tell. Well, I'll tell you one of the biggest things that turned me into a disciplined person. It was film school. It wasn't college. It was well after college.
Right.
And it's that, first of all, I left college because I had figured out, and I know this is a digression, but that I was smart enough that if I could bullshit my way through my poli-sci classes without doing most of the reading, because I was such a good bullshitter.
Right.
And I got out of class. And I would be very proud of myself. I'd be like, I got a B, You get a B without doing any of the reading and not attending many of the classes. I'm doing great, right? And then I went, I blew it. Like, the words "you're only cheating yourself" never made any sense to me. I was like, no, I'm cheating you. Look at my B. And it wasn't until after that, in particular in film school, because you can't bullshit making a film.
Nope.
You have to be prepared. Yeah. You have to have your ducks in a row. And that's where things turned around. And that's why, I tried to read all of the books that I didn't read in my poli-sci classes later on.
Wow.
And that's where but it wasn't until my mid-20s and even my 30s that I really changed, in that way.
That's understandable.
But again, thank you for saying so. And but the next thing that Mike Katz says, which I think is just says so much, is he talks about, he played for the Jets and he was injured. Wow. And he says,
that was my biggest thing, to go on a football field and be so feared. I wanted to be put in a cage, and rolled out like in a circus, big bars, and with chains and everything, and then just hope like hell that everybody would just run off the field when they saw me coming.
What do you think about him saying this statement?
Well, I think a lot of NFL players feel that way. A lot of college football players feel that way. And certainly they want to radiate that when they're on the field. Having watched decades of football, I can tell you, I have seen that. I've seen that and specifically from linebackers. Yeah. Certainly defensive ends you can get every once in a while. Like Jadeveon Clowney in college was a goddamn beast. But like in the NFL, it's a different animal. It's usually the linebackers who are these like, like Mr. T types that are hanging around, like Clubber Lang types, hanging around the back of the line and just waiting to hit the quarterback or the running back full speed or the receiver full speed and just do damage. And so what he's talking about, I'm sure many, many football players have felt this way and wanted people to feel this way about them. And I've certainly seen it when I've watched football over the years. So, yeah. But it also is a reaction to the bullying, right? He's gone so far the other way that he wants to be the bully on the field because he was bullied as a kid. And I know that because I certainly have my struggles with that over the years. But certainly it comes from a defensive mechanism. It comes from a place of fear that you don't want to be the weak one in the room or the weak one on the field. So you want everyone to fear you. So the work is almost half done already before you even step out on the field. And so I understand where he's coming from.
What's so great about it, because it's everything you said. And then the thing I would add to it is that it is in total contrast with how we feel about Mike Katz. He seems so gentle.
Yes.
And sweet and vulnerable, And so the guy who's saying, I want to be so scary that you roll me out in a cage and everyone is terrified, we just saw him playing with his kids.
Yeah.
He just seems so nice. And I think that they do a perfect job of establishing how we feel about Mike Katz.
Yeah.
And then we hear a little bit more about how it's going to be in South Africa where these competitions are, and a little bit more about Mr. Universe, Mr. Olympia, and then he's an amateur, so he's going for Mr. Universe.
As I see it from all of the people who I know who are going to be there and the best in the world are going to be there, I feel that it's going to be between me and Ken Waller for the overall championship.
And then we hear a voice say,
I don't worry about Mike Katz anyway. There's only one guy I worry about, and that's Robbie.
And we cut to Ken Waller with some bodybuilding buddies playing a football, joking about Mike Katz.
Yeah.
And Ken Waller just kind of goes off on him.
His arms aren't big enough to match his chest. Right. His thighs are too big for his calves.
Right.
He hits one pose. And that he looks like a big spider. Hey, I'm going to do when I get to Africa, I'm going to take Katz's shirt, I'm going to hide it. I'm going to take everything I can find of his, hide it. Yeah, mess his mind up a little bit.
So let's just put a pin in this scene for the moment. Yeah. We're going to return to it later on and discuss. Well, we head off to Pretoria, and this is one of it's smart construction of a film, because you would think, we're just going to go in order, and therefore you would have the Mr. Universe and the Mr. Olympia both at the end of the film because they happened one day after another.
Right.
But instead, we get Mr. Universe out of the way, and we're focusing on Ken Waller and Mike Katz, and then we're going to reset and focus on Mr. Olympia, which I think is really smart structurally.
Yeah.
And we get people weighed in, and we're posing backstage and getting ready. And again, throughout all of this, we're seeing like, they lift a little bit of weights before they go on. They put oil on. We're kind of seeing how this stuff works.
Yeah.
And then we see Mike Katz saying,
"You didn't see a blue T-shirt around?"
And he's looking around and he hears that maybe Ken Waller has it, and he's looking sort of bewildered and sad, trying to find his T-shirt. I mean, you feel really bad for Mike Katz.
Yeah, and I think this is fascinating too, Stephen. It's a fascinating window, rather, into Mike Katz because, he's just spent this time talking about how he wants to be feared, and he steps onto the field or steps into a bodybuilding competition. He wants people to be afraid of him or worried about him. And the shirt goes missing and he almost falls apart. And so that tells you that like he's worked on the surface looking a certain way so that people feel a certain way about him. But if you don't work on the mind, if you don't work on getting yourself just as strong in the mind, all that work you do isn't going to matter because you're going to be easily, easily messed with. And if you're easily messed with, it's going to affect your overall approach to things and your overall competition. And so seeing him wandering around without his shirt, he immediately is reduced. I saw him go all the way back to being the kid who was being made fun of that he spoke about earlier in the film.
So this is all manufactured.
Stop letting me talk about these things and then go, you know what? It's all a fucking lie.
Sorry, because that scene that I said, let's put a pin in this, that was the football one where he says, I'm going to steal Mike Katz's shirt.
Yeah.
That was filmed after the competition.
Oh my God.
It's totally faked. The whole thing with the shirt, it sounds like, first of all, Ken Waller and Mike Katz were really great friends.
Oh, okay. So
super close, really liked each other. He wasn't messing with the shirt. It sounds, my understanding, I'm not 100% sure of how this happened, but my understanding was like, you and I were working out in the weight room and you left early and you left a bag behind and I grabbed it. Oh, John's going to need this later.
Right.
And then you went, hey, where's my bag? And someone goes, oh, Steve has it. That's all it is. But then they went, we need more competition between the two. So they filmed the football scene with them laughing and him just like, make some jokes about, because they don't know. Again, this is exactly what you do in a reality show is you amp up a conflict.
Totally.
Ken Waller was booed on stage for the rest of his life because of this. Yep. Because people thought that he fucked with this really nice guy, Mike Katz.
Oh my God. That's terrible.
Yep.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah. Well, and this, again, this is like why I say you can't trust documentaries, you know?
Yeah, good point.
But anyway.
Or documentarians.
Yeah, exactly. We're all a bunch of fucking liars.
It took me 5 years to win Mr. Connecticut. It took me 4 years to win Mr. America. This is my 5th year that I've been trying to win Mr. Universe.
Some of the things he says, I just want to give Mike Katz a hug, you know?
It's like a dog, you know, you can kick a dog so long and it'll do two things. It's either going to roll over and die, or it's going to bite you and attack you.
And I just feel like, you were bullied as a kid and the guy stole your shirt and you feel like you're a dog and you're just like getting kicked all the time. It's like, oh my God. And they finish their posing set and we see the judges adding things up and figuring things out. And they definitely have created, tension between, the big battle's going to be Katz and Waller.
Yeah.
And then they announce the 3 finalists.
Ken Waller, USA. Paul Grant, Wales. Roger Walker, Australia.
And Mike Katz isn't one of them. Yeah. Great camera work. Going to Katz at the moment that he loses.
Yeah.
I wonder what time it is back in the States, do you know? I haven't got to call my wife.
Because he's sad. And now he's like thinking about home and all his sacrifices and the little kids and stuff.
Well, it's a pretty healthy reaction if it was authentic. Again, I don't know if Steve's going to come up behind me and go,
No, I have nothing. No, this is all totally authentic. 100% authentic.
But I think it's a very healthy way to react to this, right? And later on in life, he went towards the spiritual approach to things with his life. I did a little bit of reading on Mike Katz, and that shows you that he already was kind of leaning in that direction. So the idea that he's balancing out the loss by going like, okay, what time is it? I got to call my wife. She's probably playing with the kids who are driving her crazy. He's trying to remove the disappointment by making his mind think about the bigger picture, which is, look, I lost this, but I have a great wife. I have great kids. I have a good life. It sucks that I didn't win. It hurts that I didn't win, but like, I got to keep it in perspective. And so I thought that was healthy. And then we see just a few seconds later him going like, I got to go shake his hand. I got to go give him congratulations. Yep. So that's a very healthy way to approach a loss.
He's great. He hears that Ken won and he goes and claps for him and just like, and I know you've done this. I've done this where you have to, it is a conscious mental shift that you have to make.
Yep.
From your sadness about what you didn't get
to
congratulate your friend for the thing they did get,
Yeah. 100%.
And that's part of being a grown up. But I think, so this whole section, the Ken Waller, Mike Katz section, I think we are totally involved in these characters' journey up to this point, you know? And then we go back to Arnold, who is, you know, posing. And one of the great things they do is sort of contrast the Arnold world with everybody else's world, you know?
Yeah.
And now we're going to go back, and we heard Mike Katz's story of how he became a bodybuilder. Now we're going back to hear Arnold's story about growing up in Austria and about his dad, who was chief of police, and, you know, tensions with him and him starting these competitions.
I always felt like my place is America. And when I was 10 years old, I only dreamed of coming to America and being the greatest and just being different than everybody else.
Which he certainly is.
Yeah, in many ways.
And there are great shots of him on motorcycles, and then he's posing on the beach. And of course, he's always surrounded by lots of girls in bikinis. You know, and these are all photo shoots, and he's doing this photo shoot with these women hanging all over him. And he's got, you know, the bar that you have to bend, which probably has a name, but I just think of it as the bendy bar. I don't know what it's really called. And I love the little thing where he pretends that he can't bend it and then does bend it. It's all fun.
These are some very attractive ladies from back.
They absolutely are. And this is, you can see, they just went, hey, Arnold, let's go take you to this mountaintop and shoot some stuff. Let's go take you here and shoot some stuff, which they did. And then we're going to meet the Ferrignos.
Yeah.
And the first thing we hear is, I think it's Matty Ferrigno, which is Lou Ferrigno's dad, talking about the dream he had about Arnold.
I dreamt about Arnold last night.
Really?
I told him, Arnold, you're making a big mistake on Africa. He says, why do you say that, Mr. Ferrigno? I said, Louis is waiting for you in the shadows.
We meet Lou Ferrigno. He's 24 years old, former sheet metal worker, Mr. America, and twice Mr. Universe. He's turned professional this year and is a contender for the Mr. Olympia title.
Yeah.
One of the things the filmmakers wanted to do was contrast the bright, happy, joyful world of Gold's Gym and Venice with the darker, grittier world of Brooklyn and the Ferrignos.
Yeah.
Initially, it sounds like their image was to make Arnold the hero and Lou Ferrigno the scary bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
That was because, again, they're making things to some degree fictitious, you know, to create a conflict.
Yeah.
But as they started to do it, that didn't quite work because, again, Lou also is kind of sweet in his way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you don't really, even though he's huge, you don't really feel like, oh, he's scary exactly.
The first time Arnold came to America, I took Louis backstage, and when Arnold went by us, I'll never forget, I looked at Louis' face, and he just looked at Arnold with awe. I thought God just passed us. And I looked at Louis, I said, what do you think, Louis? And he looked at me and said, see, Dad, he's big.
So Arnold was an inspiration for Lou Ferrigno from the beginning.
Yeah.
And we see them working out together. And one of the things that does it can't help but impress you is the pain these guys go through in these kind of workouts, you know?
Yeah. I mean, look, you're supposed to lift to failure in order to grow the muscle. You know, that's what you're trained and told and thought. But like the level to which they're going to failure is astounding.
Yeah.
And when when they're encouraging them to give me two more, and you hear the yelps and the cries of pain, that is on a whole nother level than anything, you know, we regular people who work out would experience, you know.
And we hear a little bit more about Lou Ferrigno's childhood and that he had this ear infection and that's what caused his deafness, and that they didn't even know that he was deaf for a long time. And then, you know, it sounds similar to Mike Katz on some levels. He's, you know, doesn't quite fit in. He's a skinny kid. He's shy. He, you know, because he can't hear well. And then he sees Steve Reeves, and we see those. By the way, I'm sure you in the back of your comics had that Charles Atlas cartoon where the bully's kicking sand in your face.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny. Every single comic I had that. And every time I got to the end of the comic, I always read it. You know what I mean? Over and over again. I think that little sand in my face thing is like the classic nerdy, shy kid. Totally. I'm going to someday stand up to the bully and get the girls. It's perfect, you know? And I love that you could see that the muscle magazines at the time are building up to this competition because you have, you know, Lou Ferrigno magazine article that says, bring me the head of Arnold, you know? And you have Dad's constant voice of just, you're going to be the best. He says,
wherever he goes, you pose down with him, right next to him. Let the judges make a comparison. You're 6'5", you're going to be the biggest thing that ever went out on that platform at 275 pounds, Louis. They know that, and he knows it. This is for the big baby, Louis.
And what's weird is some of the times Lou Ferrigno's not facing him, and Lou Ferrigno doesn't hear well.
Yeah.
And so it's like Dad is talking to his back. It's very strange, this relationship.
You know, all of us know sports dads or sports moms,
yes,
right? And this is essentially what you're seeing here, which I thought was an interesting element of the documentary. And I don't know if you're going to tell me that this was all fabricated as well. Maybe you will, but like watching this and what he represented, I think is fascinating, honestly, because I keep using that word because this entire documentary is a fascinating window into human thought processes, right? And this dad of Ferrigno's very much wants to take center stage. Even later on in the film when he says like, oh, you know, when he poses up there, I'm posing up there. He gets the ovations. That's the only thing I don't get. He gets the ovation. He deserves it, trying to cover his butt. But he's basically giving you a window into the fact that this is a guy who probably had visions or dreams of being a success in a certain way, of being recognized by a majority of people or being famous or whatever. And this opportunity comes along, and throughout the entire film, he is making himself the focus of the scenes and even wears these bright colored suits, so like the track suits and bright colored jackets so that he stands out. You know, it's not that he's not encouraging his son, he is, but he's also acting as if he knows better than his son. And my guess is that he doesn't. So, but you see that as a person who's played sports or seen people play sports. You know the sports dad or sports mom, and that's what he's representing.
Well, John, you mentioned whether or not this is fabricated, and I have to inform you that to some degree it is. And I don't quite understand entirely, but what I did read, and they did say, and you mentioned that documentary Raw Iron, that's sort of the making of it. I watched that too, and it's Maddie, I believe it's Maddie Ferrigno, was never Lou's trainer until this film. This was something that the filmmakers brought him in to train, to look like he was Lou's trainer. And what's interesting, I heard some quotes from Lou Ferrigno too, which is that at the time, you know, Lou's speech improved markedly over the years. So today when you hear him speak, he speaks really, really well. And I think his lip reading's gotten better. And I don't know if he's got better devices to help him with hearing or what's going on. But at this time, his speech wasn't great. He was not confident with it. His hearing was obviously bad. And so he basically let his dad talk for him because it was too hard for him to communicate. And therefore, it sounds like Lou Ferrigno was not happy about the image that was created of him and his relationship with his father in this film. You know.
Why? Because it was false? Or did he feel like it undercut him as a person who constructed himself on his own?
I get a vibe. So two things. One is I think that he just wasn't able to speak for himself.
Oh, okay.
Which he really wishes that he could have spoken for himself a little bit more. Yeah. I also, you know, another film, the very first documentary he ever did on the Cine-Files and one of our very first movies, period, is When They Were Kings.
Yeah, When We Were Kings. Yeah.
And I think the treatment of Lou Ferrigno as this silent giant is similar to the treatment of George Foreman in that film. Oh, you know what I mean?
Right. Good call.
Like that he is just treated as this, you know, force of nature. Right. But we don't really hear or get a sense of who Lou Ferrigno is in this movie in that way.
Yeah. Good point.
Where, again, Arnold joyfully playing in the beach and having lots of fun, and then he's sleeping, and this other bodybuilder comes up to inform him that he's going to be in New York and going to be working with Lou Ferrigno, and he says,
everything that I learned from you, that you stole from me, I'm going to give him. So I figure the combination is going to be very hard to beat, Arnold. Very hard.
And he's trying to get Arnold to say, like, don't sell my secrets or something like that.
Tell Louis that I said hi.
Yeah.
Said to his father that I said hi. And I'm looking forward to seeing him in South Africa.
I'm just like, he's so above it all.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, he's irritated that he was even woken up for this useless conversation. Yeah.
See, the king of the hill can only go down.
That's right.
The king of the hill can only go down.
There's stay up.
Or he can stay on that hill.
Right.
That's the other possibility.
Stay on the hill.
I like the eating thing. It's like, oh, the hungry lion needs to eat, and he's like, well, yeah, but that's the difference. The headline it knows where the food is.
Yep.
I love that.
Yep. And then he gives a little wink even.
Yeah.
And again, more training with Lou. It's just brutal. At one point, he's screaming Arnold every time he lifts, which again, I think was something the filmmakers made him do,
Probably.
And the other thing I think we see is opposed to Dad in this weird gym. And there's even this moment with Lou where they cut to this sort of heavier guy lifting light weights, and it's just so funny. It's so funny compared to these, huge, powerful men that they cut to that. And then but when you go to Arnold, there's all this sense of camaraderie that he's sort of the king of this group and they're all having fun and pushing each other, including, Arnold's doing lifts with, girls on his back and stuff.
It almost feels like they're trying to do West Coast versus East Coast.
Yes, totally.
Right? The East Coast is down in the gutter, in the basements where it's hard. We're training with dudes who aren't, necessarily going to talk to me. And I don't know if that's probably a production guy now that you're telling me all these things that are staged or fabricated. Like that's probably a production guy. They're like, look, lift as small of weights as you can, but look over at him like he's a weirdo for being that big. And so that's what you get. And he's perfectly in frame. And I imagine you wouldn't have kept him in frame or those shots if you weren't trying to have some kind of message come out of his face looking at Ferrigno. But yeah, you're right, Steve. It's like when you go to the Schwarzenegger's like, oh, buddy, and the sun is out. I got beautiful women and my boys are here. And whereas Lou is like down in the basement in the trenches with carpeted floors and shit,
It's and it's also, again, it's Rocky because it's Apollo Creed training and not taking the first fight seriously and the down, all the way to Rocky IV, like the contrast in the training montages is classic sports movie setups,
100%.
After Lou does this ridiculous workout, his dad goes,
Don't ever feel sorry for yourself. Remember, if you're training hard, he may be training twice as hard. You just got to keep coming back stronger.
And there are times, by the way, again, I just keep marveling at the amount of weight they're lifting, the intensity of the workouts, the pain they're going through. And the movie really makes you look at these men's muscles, and look at their form and look at the vascularity and look at the definition and see it in a way that we haven't seen before. And again, you go to the influence of this film is that, like, imagine Marvel movies without pumping iron.
This is absolutely influenced to Marvel movies. Yes, 100%. Just like it influenced comic book designs of characters. I think it absolutely, like, Image basically owes their entire launch to pumping iron and the weightlifting industry, the bodybuilding industry, for God's sakes. Because in the initial Image, people were all so massively large. Like Savage Dragon was insanely large with those muscles and those lines. Like almost all those guys coming out of that time from Image initially were these massive. I think Jim Lee drew them so big and stuff. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, I think I said this years ago, probably when we did Enter the Dragon, but I believe that abs come from Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon and Arnold in Pumping Iron.
Yeah.
It's like if you look at all it's not that people didn't have muscles and they didn't have some definitions. They did, but you cannot be a young male actor and take your shirt off in Hollywood today without a six-pack.
Yeah.
It's like against the law at this point.
Yeah.
So we have a guy, I think his name is Eddie. He's doing squats and Arnold is pushing him and sort of spotting him. And you see him get those last two. He stands up and then full passes out. I mean, I don't think it's a joke. I think this guy goes down.
Yeah.
And then we get this speech from Arnold, which I think you alluded to before, of what it takes to get to this level.
Pain in your muscles and aching, and just then go on and go on and then go on. And this last 2 or 3 or 4 repetitions, that's what makes actually the muscle then grow. And that divides then one from a champion and one from not being a champion. If you can go through this pain barrier, you make it to be a champion. If you can't go through, forget it.
This is what I didn't have when I was young. You know what I mean? Like that desire to get through that pain barrier to the next level,
No, you totally need to have it because it gets tough.
Well, and I think, talking about a career in the arts or any, it's always what it is it's the middle of the night and you got more work and you have to make it right and you stick to it, know?
Yep. 100%.
Well, it's funny talking about discipline and me, the place where I did have it was theater.
Yeah.
if it was making a play or something like that, I would work as long as was necessary to do the piece of art.
Yeah.
But I didn't have it for school, and I didn't have it for exercise, and I didn't have it for a bunch of other stuff, know.
And that's where most people lack, is on this, having the guts to go in and just say, I go through and I don't care what happens. It aches, and if I fall down, I have no fear of fainting in a gym, because I know it could happen. I threw up many times while I was working out.
Which I never have, but I've come close a couple of times.
When I did CrossFit for 3 years, and they had those workouts that were just insane, they have a term for it, right? You call it a pukey. And have you had a pukey? And how many times have you had a pukey? I don't recall ever throwing up from a workout, but I've seen people throw up from a workout. And I always think I know people say, oh, you've pushed yourself to a limit. I also think maybe you didn't gauge that you'd eaten the food and it hadn't processed enough. And so by irritating your stomach in this way, that's why you're throwing up, because I've always felt that that's what is a majority of the reason why people are throwing up after workouts.
And now we're going to focus on Franco Columbo a little bit.
Yeah.
And we hear about, that he grew up in Sardinia and that he was the flyweight champion boxer in Europe or something. And then we go back. They got enough money to fly back to Sardinia, and you have an iconic moment where we're seeing the world that he grew up with, and you see his dad, and then we see Franco Columbo pick up the back of a car and move a car into a parking space.
How much of this is fabricated, Steve? How much of this is real?
I believe it is. Not only do I believe it is totally real, but I, in fact, have picked up the back of a car.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I don't think, maybe you knew me when I had the Miata. Yeah, you did. I think I had the Miata was my favorite car that I had.
Didn't you use that for?
It was in Siren.
Yeah. Siren. Sorry.
Yeah. And so when I moved to LA, I drove a truck with all my stuff and Karen's stuff down to LA, and the Miata was on a trailer on the back, and it was one where the wheels are totally off the ground.
Right.
And we get to our apartment in LA and went, wait, we can't leave all of it's like 10 o'clock at night. We can't leave all of our stuff on a truck sitting on a street in Los Angeles.
Right.
So we moved everything in, up 3 flights of stairs. And now it's like 1 a.m. and we go, we need to go get some food. And so I get in my Miata that's on this trailer, and I put it in reverse, and I go backwards, and I didn't put the ramp down to roll off the thing. So the back of the Miata just hit down, and the back 2 wheels were on the ground, or not even the wheels. I think it was just like the bumper was on the ground, and half of it was like balanced on the thing. And I'm like, oh, we're fucked. And I was, let's say, pumped and exhausted and punchy. And so I literally picked up the back of the Miata and pulled it off of that ramp.
Wow.
Now, a Miata is a very small car.
Yes, it is.
But I did get it an inch off the ground so I could move it.
You can say car. And
it was a car.
Yeah, it was a car.
Yeah. And then we cut to, which is, I think, maybe the most impressive thing in the whole movie, Franco Columbo blowing up a hot water bottle, which he explodes. And we talk about whether or not Franco can beat Arnold.
Yes.
And I think, I'm not anywhere near a bodybuilding expert. I don't know how the judging works. I don't know anything else. Right. Franco Columbo looks really good in this movie.
Yes, he does. Yeah. And he was well known as he said, because I remember reading those magazines, people talking about him, for being one of the strongest dudes and one of the most defined guys with his body. It was just that he was small. And that is always what kind of kept him. And plus Arnold was around at the same time. So it's hard to win in that situation.
So we have the under 200-pound Franco Columbo, who looks awesome, who's a buddy of Arnold's. And then we have the ginormous Lou Ferrigno. And this is what we're setting up as the main competition the main competition here.
Right.
More training with Lou. And then Dad gives him this whole thing about how he should pose with his arms, that he should look at them first and then hit the pose and be impressed with them. And I don't think Lou Ferrigno ever really gets what his dad is trying to get him to do. And now knowing that he really wasn't his trainer, I also go is Dad giving him good advice here? Is this a good thing to say?
Right.
Then we're with Arnold on a couch. By the way, he's in one of the interviews, he's wearing the greatest 70s shirt, brightly colored. It's just perfect.
Yeah.
And they're asking if he's worried about Lou Ferrigno. And he says,
at the day of the contest, if he comes in his best shape and he's equally as good as I am, or if, let's say, he's a few % better as I am, I spent with him one night. I go downstairs and book us together in a room. you know, to help him for tomorrow's contest. And that night, he will never forget.
And you see this evil look on Arnold's face.
I will mix him up. He will come so ready to South Africa, so strong. But by the time the night is over, the next morning, he will be ready to lose. So that's why it doesn't matter if he comes in shape or out of shape. If he comes out of shape, at least has less hassle from me, you know. And if he's in shape, fine. I hope he is.
Again, kind of manufactured for the movie.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, all these guys really like each other, you know?
Yeah.
And well, in the next moment, this is definitely, Arnold said this was just complete bullshit, is that he says, because then they talk about Franco Columbo.
But you couldn't pull this with Franco, could you? Franco's pretty smart.
Franco is pretty smart, but Franco is a child. And when it comes to the day of the contest, I'm his father. He comes to me for advices. So it's not that hard for me to give him the wrong advices.
And then there's that smile again.
Yeah.
And Arnold has said, this is like he and Franco were best friends. This wasn't how he felt about Franco at all. He didn't mess with Franco. I think obviously they both wanted to win and Arnold wanted to win, but it wasn't this kind of a relationship, you know?
Mhm.
And now we're heading off to Pretoria. We have a weird thing where Lou Ferrigno's posing with like a cheetah that starts licking his leg.
That was strange, man.
And then someone is asking him about bodybuilding and if he has disrespected the sport of bodybuilding or misused his power. And he tells this whole story about this guy who thought he was a great poser and that Arnold convinced him to scream at the top of his lungs at all his poses and that he got dragged out of the competition for being a crazy person.
He thought he was crazy. Yeah, exactly.
I have no idea if this is true. This one is true or not. But knowing everything else, now I kind of go, I wonder if this is just some other thing that he's making up. You know?
Right.
And then Arnold is sitting, eating with his hand shaking because he's so nervous. And we realize he's eating breakfast with Lou and his family.
The guys are psyching me out here early in the morning.
Easy.
Huh?
The bus rider will calm you down.
The only way to do it.
Lay down in the bus in the back.
Hey, Lou. Is this a master plan here this morning? Right? Huh? Be on guard.
It's amazing how you could just feel Arnold's charisma everywhere he goes, I think. You know? And this is sort of what we came to expect based on that other speech of that how he's going to mess with Lou's head.
Mm.
What's weird to me about the scene is that Lou's dad is just kissing up to Arnold the whole scene.
The whole time.
Yeah.
You're the king of kings, They don't come nicer than you, Arnold.
I'm a nice guy.
I wouldn't turn my back on you, Arnold, within 500 yards.
If this is, like you said, if this was fabricated, then they're asking him to do some other version of a what do you call it? Of a mental warfare.
Yeah.
And so he's going the other way, which is to butter up Arnold, to make him feel confident about himself. And so Arnold starts to feel good and thinks the other people aren't going to bring their A game. But that's not the truth, right? And so when you see it happening, you're just like, oh, this is not even going to work on Arnold. You know, it's such a pathetic attempt at this. It's not going to work.
And then the real Arnold messing with Lou Ferrigno is...
They should have it in a month for him. He's not even in shape yet. I mean, gee, he didn't get the timing right. I'm telling you. A month from now would have been perfect for you. But then I get bigger too again. So, you know...
Then again, I'd get better too. So there's really nothing you can do. Even though I just told you what you could do, there's nothing you can do.
And again, it's kind of how I feel about Mike Katz is like, they set up, Mike Katz says this thing about, I want to be this terrifying animal in a cage, but he ends up being so sweet, you know, that you just feel bad for him. Watching Lou Ferrigno sitting at this table with his dad kissing up to Arnold and Arnold trying to mess with him, I just feel so bad for 24-year-old Lou Ferrigno, you know?
Yeah, agreed.
But this is what's weird about it, and this is why I go back to the thing of being a heel. I don't turn on Arnold.
Yeah, no.
You know?
That's what I mean. He's got this ability to do this stuff that if this was a really nefarious person, you would hate this person.
Yep.
But there's a way he's delivering it that feels like, okay, this is banter. And the problem is there are probably not a lot of people in the bodybuilding world who had this advanced ability to shit talk, because he's essentially shit talking, which is what you do on a basketball court, in a sports competition, any competition. You know, when I did the Schmodown talking those promos, that's a bunch of shit talking. And so you not a lot of people can do it naturally. And he just has that ability. And I imagine a lot of these guys were kind of just caught on their heels by some of the stuff he would do.
And Dad just keeps kissing his ass.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing because you have Arnold basking in his own glory, which is rare that you actually get to see someone genuinely, but he's just going like,
you know, it's amazing. Can you imagine the feeling I have 6 times Mr. Olympia?
I told you found the fountain of youth.
It's incredible.
You could go on forever.
It blows my mind when I think about it.
People are going to get so tired.
I called my mother yesterday already, and I said I won. She says, "Congratulations, Arnold." You know.
But I also do think that Arnold was scared of Lou in terms of that Lou might beat him, because the way he's writing roughshod over Lou, and later we'll see. And again, I don't know how much of this is fabricated or real, but if you're looking at it from what you're being presented, this is a guy who is legitimately a little bit shaken by Lou, because Lou's not saying anything. Like Lou's trying to say some small stuff, but Arnold is overriding him. He's purposely misunderstanding him to mess with him. And so all of that is happening there. But I do think Arnold is a little bit afraid, because he wouldn't try to silence someone or ride roughshod over their voice if you weren't intimidated by them a little bit.
Right.
And so I think there is, if this is authentic back and forth, then I think there is a little bit of that going on here that you can see. And later when Arnold tells him to stop making so much noise when he's working out in the area.
That one,
yeah, it's clear that he's a little bit shaken by Lou or worried about Lou.
We hear a little bit more about the competition, that there's going to be the lightweights and then the heavyweights, and then the winner of each of those will compete for the final Mr. Olympia. And we start with the under 200 pound thing, where Franco's main competition is this guy, Ed Corney, who's a nightclub owner. And we watch them posing. And as this is happening, Lou's dad is all over him about getting wrinkles in his back and how he's posing. And it's so funny. I really wish I didn't know. I don't think this movie is made better by knowing that Lou's dad really wasn't involved in his training other than in this movie.
Right.
I think it makes me distrust everything I'm seeing with Lou and his dad. Yeah. And this was where we get into, we're in the weight room with the two of them, and Arnold is still messing with Lou. He says he looks small, tells him to be quiet, all the, like shouldn't make so much noise.
Right.
It's no fun. When Arnold walks onto the stage, he just owns the stage, man.
Yeah. I'm telling you, watching this film and watching his body at this stage of his life, I'm not playing favorites. You are in awe of this body. There are a lot of great bodies in this movie, but there is something about his body that instinctually feels like this is the perfect body. And when he walks out onto the stage, you're just in awe of the lines and the overall size. And I know you're going to get to it later when he talks about, like, I don't have any weak spots.
I had weak points a few years ago, but my main thing in mind is, my goal always was to even out everything to the point that everything is perfect. Which means if I want to increase one muscle a half inch, the rest of the body has to increase. I would never just make one muscle increase or decrease.
That's genius. And that's something I don't know that a lot of bodybuilders would have necessarily thought to do. And so to hear him break it down like that just was fascinating.
I think it connects perfectly to the sculpture thing at the beginning of the film like, now he's giving you one more piece of that. Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, I remember a moment with it wasn't The Last Dance, it was another Michael Jordan documentary, but there was a moment where, Michael Jordan said something like, and it was at that moment that I realized I had mastered the game of basketball.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that and going like, oh, do we ever master anything? Like, can you really say that? And then the next thought I had was, no, this is Michael Jordan. He gets to say that,
Steve, that's great. Philosophically,
well, and that's what I had in this moment of watching Arnold. I'm looking at it on stage and I'm like, yeah, he's mastered, he has mastered this,
It's the Neo moment. The greatest of the greats always have the Neo stuff, man. Always. You just go, you know what? I can't touch that,
Yeah. And it's like, literally, just as you said, in my notes, I say, he looks amazing. It's crazy how good he looks. Look at the symmetry. Look at the, like I'm noticing the things that he is pointing out for me to notice, both from the interview and from how he poses,
Yeah, agreed.
Then we're back in an interview, and then we have another section, which I will tell you in advance is not true, which is he's talking about him. I think part of this is true. Philosophically, it's true about you have to cut out negative forces to be a champion.
Yeah.
I think this is totally true. And talking about like, he's not going to let a relationship with a girl or his car getting stolen or anything else happening affect what he has to do in the competition. I think that is 100% true. I think that is Arnold's belief. I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Then he tells this story.
When my father died, because my mother called me on the phone and she said, your dad died. And this was exactly 2 months before a contest. She says, do you come home to the funeral? I said, no. It's too late, he's dead. There's nothing to be done. And I'm sorry, I can't come, And I didn't explain to her really the reasons why. I had other excuses to her, because how do you explain a mother whose husband died, you trip. I didn't bother with it.
So this is not true. Arnold saw his dad shortly before he died and was at his father's funeral.
What the fuck? Why would you lie about your dad's funeral, attending your dad's funeral? Wow.
He says, what Arnold says is this was a story told to him by another bodybuilder that he just stole. And it's again because he and the filmmakers are trying to create this competition and this image of conflict. And I mean, it's just like saying the thing about the pump is like coming, it's like creating this image of who Arnold is and of what it takes to be this thing that is different from what actually the reality is.
It's your dad. Like, that's not something to mess with. Anyway, all right.
Well, I also think, because, as much as I think there are great things that come out of this movie, if you talk about like ideas of toxic masculinity and things like that, and I know lots of people don't like these terms,
right?
But there are a lot of dudes in the 80s that I knew coming up that took this movie as fucking gospel.
Yeah.
And just said based all of their stuff on what was presented to them, which now I know was not really the truth.
Right. Women weaken legs. Yeah.
That one is true. Women do weaken legs. We're getting to the finals. We see all of them posing, including Franco. There's lots of cheers. We announce the places for the under 200, and Franco Columbo is the winner of the under 200 class. So he will face off with the winner of the other class. Right. And again, we're back in lifting. This is actually where he tells Lou to be quiet.
I'm training, Arnold. I got to get a good pump. You make too much noise. It has to be very quiet here, like in the church.
I just think you could see in the way that they film it. And again, I don't know that this was what was happening.
Right.
But the way it seems and the way it's cut together is that Lou Ferrigno is just hyper aware of everyone around him, everyone looking at him, and particularly hyper aware of Arnold.
Yeah. 100%.
But again, with documentary, is you could have taken that reaction shot from the day before, and Arnold's not even in the room, and it would create that illusion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
And these are our top three. And they come for a pose down, and Lou is just huge, but Arnold looks the best.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Lou looks beefy and not as defined as Arnold does. And I forget the other gentleman's name. I think it's a French
He's
guy.
French. It's Sergei Nubret.
Sergei Nubret looks great.
Or Serge. He's probably Serge.
Or Serge, right. Probably Serge. So he looks fantastic. So it's not a surprise that Lou comes in third, even though the narrative of the film makes you feel like he might unseat the king. He's actually a little more beefier than you would want to see for a Mr. Olympia.
And this is the moment that you mentioned before, and I 100% agree, of Lou's dad's talking about being up with him when he's posing, and it so feels like what I want the adoration that Lou is getting,
Yeah. Vicariously through his child.
Exactly. And there's a long pause, and the anticipation is growing, and then finally they announce that
third place from the United States of America, Lou Ferrigno. Second place from France, Sirs, you brave.
And then there's the huge reaction to
And the winner, one and only, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And now we have the pose off between Franco and Arnold, and they come out posing together. And this is where I think it was obvious that Arnold was the winner in the heavyweight. I don't think it's obvious between Arnold and Franco.
That's the thing. And I think this is where they had to, and I wonder if maybe they influenced the judges here to try to make Arnold win, or try to make it, he's the star of the movie. He can't lose at the end here. We've turned him into this villain. He can't all of a sudden lose. The villain's got to either win or be beaten by the hero. And we haven't turned Franco into the hero at all. So I wonder, but I don't want to cast aspersions, but it's not like Arnold. You couldn't make a case that he didn't look as good as Franco, but I agree with you that Franco looked better when you're looking at both of those bodies. I think it's just him being shorter. If it's authentically what happened, is what ended up undercutting him here.
Well, it's also the thing too, and again, I don't know anything about this, and people who know more about competitive bodybuilding might correct it, but I don't know how you discount charisma. You know what I mean?
Right.
Arnold, we've talked about, when you got to book the room as an actor.
Yeah.
You got to walk in like that job is already yours for your job interview.
Yeah.
Arnold has walked onto the stage as Mr. Olympia.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That his whole attitude is, I have already won this. I am the best.
Right.
And of course he wins, and the crowd goes wild for him. And then we have Dad kind of giving Lou a little pep talk at the end. He says,
You're a baby, Lou. These guys are all veterans. You're just growing. This takes years and years. In 2 years from now, Louis, they'll never seen anything like you. They'll think you were carved out of stone.
At least it's the one rare moment where he's actually legitimately encouraging to his son.
Yeah.
But Lou never does win it. So.
Yep. And it's later on, and Arnold is smoking weed. It is Arnold is numero uno shirt. And by the way, that is really weed. They didn't fake that. He is smoking weed. And they sing happy birthday to Lou because it's his birthday.
I don't even know that it's his birthday.
I don't know either.
So I wonder if it's fabricated.
Hold on.
Yeah.
We can find out this answer. I bet I can find that answer. You keep talking.
What is the date of his birthday? Because I feel like this is Arnold fucking with him one more time by being
it is his birthday. It is his birthday.
Oh, okay. All right.
Because it is November 9th yeah.
Fair point. I thought they were fucking with him like Arnold one last time, being like, well, you didn't win, but everyone's going to sing you happy birthday.
Totally. Totally could be that. But no, in fact, it is his birthday. And then there's just this beat in this bus. And it's so, and first of all, I guess Arnold is still messing with him. He's like, I'm going to come to your house and date your sister and all this stuff.
Your mom's going to make me food and I'm going to have sex with your sister is what he's basically saying in male speak. That's what he's basically saying. Your mom's going to feed me, then I'm going to have sex with your sister.
And I love, though, the moment that Lou's like taking off his jacket and Arnold kind of cowers from him. And then they do this weird, like trying to look bigger than each other in the back of the bus. And it's really funny, I think. In the last moment. And then we've reached the end of Pumping Iron, and we're going to get some fun stills during our credits and our Pumping Iron song. And it's so, and I'll give you just a little bit on post is that the movie they ran out. So they raised $400,000 and they ran out of money and couldn't finish the film.
Yeah.
And so they're going around to all the rich people that put money in, trying to get more money. They can't get more money. And finally they come up with the idea of doing a event at the Whitney Museum in New York, where they bring in the main guys, Arnold, Lou, I think Lou was there, Franco Columbo, to pose as art for art critics. And the art critics and the intelligentsia and the hoi polloi, the art scene in New York, all show up to this event. And they see these, massive men looking like posing as statues in an art gallery. And they are the toast of the town. And they just have money. People are throwing money at them. They finally had to just have, a big, huge pile of $5 bills that people are just in the middle of a room that they're like sweeping up. It sounds like it's like a strip club or something. They're throwing so much money. And that is the money they got to finish the film.
Wow.
Yeah. By the way, the photographer at this event was Candice Bergen.
Oh, wow. Of course it was.
Yeah.
Of course it was Candice.
The movie made $2 million. Lou Ferrigno, when a movie first came out, he was genuinely angry about the way he was portrayed, angry about the way his father was shown. And then it took him a little bit of time to kind of find peace with it. Right. And of course, in 1978, which is right after this movie comes out, is that he gets the gig of being the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah. And you know, people say, oh no, the movie came out in 78. He was Hulk in 77. No, the movie came out in 78. But it had been shot like in 75 or something.
75, yeah.
Yeah. So like he had not gotten Hulk yet. But certainly it coincides and works out for him in that way that it's around the same time.
Well, and what I don't know, because obviously I was watching The Incredible Hulk, my assumption is I saw Lou Ferrigno as the Hulk before I saw Pumping Iron.
I know I did.
I think I probably did too, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Franco Columbo became a chiropractor. And I know that Dan Panosian, the urban barbarian, who was obviously a huge Arnold disciple, specifically went to Franco Columbo to have his back cracked.
Get the F out of here. I did not know that.
Yeah. Both Mike Katz and Ken Waller ended up running gyms, and Mike Katz was involved in judging bodybuilding competitions for years. Most of these guys all stayed friends, it sounds like.
That's good.
And that is everything I have on Pumping Iron.
Wow. Okay.
Would you like to give me your final thoughts?
You know what? No. Yeah, I would. I'm glad you said yes to do this. It had been a while since I'd seen this one, and of course, us having that wonderful conversation with Brendan for Total Recall put it in my mind. And you know, we like to occasionally drop these like one episode ones to kind of take a break from the multi-part ones. And I thought we don't do that many documentaries on here, and I wanted to watch this with you because I know you, or talk about it with you because you're a documentarian. So I always wonder about what you're seeing that we as people who are not documentarians don't see, and what you're catching that we as non-documentarians don't catch. But you know, I got what I wanted to have out of this with you was the conversation of like, well, what's real, what isn't real, how are they making this all happen? You know, what are they focusing on? How are they creating the narrative? And so all of that is here in this movie. But I think this movie, and I watched the cleaned up version of it that they have now, the kind of up-res version of it that looks really nice. It is a great time capsule into that time. If you're A, have no clue what that time was like, or B, if you live through that time, it's a great nostalgic dip back into that time of the late 70s and what was going on. And I think it's a film that still holds up in terms of creating the narrative of like, there is the possibility of greatness. People can achieve it, but the level of work and dedication that you have to put into achieving that greatness, if you want the ultimate top greatness, it will require every fiber of your being. And watching the dedication and time and effort and knowledge that these people, and people Arnold specifically, put into creating the thing that they are creating, which is their body, is astounding. And it's very similar to what you see later in Beyond the Mat, that documentary about pro wrestling. There's a lot of pumping iron in Beyond the Mat in showing you the daily lives of these people, how they interact, how they work on this stuff, how like when they go to pose, you think it's this massive thing and it's like 40 people in a room. And they're essentially, I don't want to make the connection in terms of slavery, but certainly they're being brought out to be analyzed, looked at, poked and prodded in order to be judged, right, in a certain way. And so now it's much more highfalutin or whatever. But you got to remember that when this was starting out, it was very bare bones. And so to see the beginnings of this and what it eventually led to is massive explosion of fitness, I think the documentary still, Pumping Iron still carries weight and power and resonance. And so if you're, you know, starting out as a documentary filmmaker, I think there's lessons for you to learn here watching this film. And if you're a lover of Arnold Schwarzenegger, this film never gets old for you because you see the beginnings of what he's going to be and how he's going to take on the world by storm in a lot of what he does here in this movie.
Yeah, I think there's several things about this. The first is it's a totally entertaining hour and 20 minutes. You know what I mean? 100%. Yeah, it sucks you in. It's fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Right. You get a good sense of all these characters, and it really totally works. The second thing is that it's a fun sports movie. It very much follows the structure of a sports film, and like some of those are the elements that are manufactured for the film, but it definitely builds up tension around who is going to win, and you enjoy, how it all goes down. Right. I think the thing you say about Arnold is so 100% true, because I think what's so interesting to me is people really made fun of Arnold. I don't think that people coming up today can conceive of how much Arnold was the butt of jokes on Johnny Carson or Letterman or whatever on all of television for a good decade, because people didn't take him seriously. And what's so interesting, knowing who Arnold became, it became the governor and all the things that we know about him later on, is you can totally see, man, people should have always taken this guy seriously.
Right.
This is a smart, interesting, complicated, charismatic, powerful personality. Yeah. And you could see it all in this film.
I like. Recently, I was watching an interview with Kelly Clarkson, and she talked about how all these people who made fun of me, because remember, she was on the first American Idol, and all these people who made fun of me for being on American Idol, all these celebrities who made fun of reality shows, made fun specifically of me and specifically of American Idol, a lot of them ended up on my couch on my daytime talk show. And that's where you see what you're talking about with the Arnold situation. They all made fun of him because he really did intimidate them, and he was this massive, huge thing. And so these guys these people reverted back to high school and making fun of the dumb jocks. Well, the problem is this guy was an intelligent jock, and now you guys are the ones going to see his movies with your kids and your grandkids, and his name, it carries much more weight than y'all's name. And so that's another lesson coming out of the movie, is they'll make fun of you if you're trying to do something, but if you believe in yourself enough, there's a very real possibility that all of them are going to be eating at the dinner table you made and you built. And that's an important thing to remember, because Arnold could have easily slid into bitterness, but none of that is in this movie. There's no bitterness in this movie at all, which is another reason why you can enjoy it. He's very clear about what he wants to do.
Well, and I think the thing too is that it is convincing in terms of, if you at the beginning of watching this movie thought this bodybuilding thing was kind of bullshit or not a real sport or whatever, by the end of this movie, you're sold, I think. Is that they do a great job of explaining how it works. And in particular, the amount of effort and discipline that it takes to do this kind of thing, you can't help but be impressed by. And then the final thing, I think this movie changes the world. It changes physical fitness. It changes the way we think about bodies in all sorts of ways that maybe aren't so good, because we have a lot of unrealistic images of how bodies should look. And it's definitely changed the aesthetics of film forever,
Yeah, great point, Steve.
So that is what we think of Pumping Iron. Of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can visit us on our Facebook page. Just do a search for the Cine-Files. It's Cine_Files on Twitter. It's the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. You can buy or stream Pumping Iron along with every other film we've ever reviewed on Cine-Files.net. As we said at the beginning of the show, Apple Podcasts for a subscription for ad-free versions of the show and our shorts. Those are also available at patreon.com/the Cine-Files, in addition to all of the other things on our tiers, like getting an upcoming schedule of what's coming in the Cine-Files, or watch-alongs, of asking questions, suggesting topics for shorts, and joining our Cine-Files advisory board. And if you want to reach me, it's SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how would people reach you?
You can always reach me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says. Please come over to the YouTube channel. Really, really want to get to 50,000 subscribers to the channel. So we have hundreds of thousands of people who listen to our show. Would love for y'all to head over and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as subscribing to our YouTube channel, which is growing day by day. So come and subscribe to both of those things as well. And then my other podcasts, of course, that I do, the Geek Buddies, the Hot Mic, and the Jedi Way, they're out there for y'all to enjoy.
So that's a whole bunch of shows for you to subscribe to before you come back next week for another great film right here on the Cine-Files.